for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football.
Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Nearly 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 17th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 23 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Brian Eikenberry and Andy Hall.
It truly doesn't get more exciting than fantasy playoff time. Are you ready? Doesn't matter what seed you earned, whether you're 10-3 with a full head of steam or 6-7 and limped your way in, everything gets reset back to zero once the playoffs come around. Doesn't matter who your opponent is or what he or she did to you in the regular season. What does matter is lineup efficiency. What does matter is sometimes going against conventional wisdom and swinging for the fences when you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. That's where we come in. Welcome to the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Andy Hall joined, as always, by Mr. Brian Eikenberry. Exciting time, my friend.
Yes, this is when it gets awesome. If you're in the playoffs, of course. If you're on the losing end, well, consider yourself lucky and you can have stress-free Sundays now. But I am that swing for the fence guy, and I totally dig it. I love doing those big risky plays because I'm a win it all or go home with nothing, which parlaying that into our plus 44 grading system from last week, which was
nice.
A pretty high scoring fantasy football week, pretty high scores for our grading system, and overall just a pretty good week.
I think we can assume most people, if not 100% at this point, are playoff people. I think people that didn't make the playoffs probably aren't wasting their time with us.
That's right, and it's probably going to be reflected in some of our matchups here. It's something to consider. I know definitely in mine I put a playoff bias on it.
What do you mean by playoff bias?
Oh, well, sure. So, if you are in the playoffs and you are starting a number three wide receiver, then you're probably not in the right line of business. You are probably one of those people who limped in, so you probably need to pay attention for the bargain bins to take those big swings for them swinging from them fences.
Wonderful tease. No matter how you found us, iTunes, Stitcher, the Libsyn website, or our radio home, 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines, we're happy to have you. Got a solid hour ahead in which we'll break down all the games, grade all the fantasy-relevant players, ask 3 of the toughest questions in all of fantasy football in the pop quiz, and offer some help for those of you in dire situations with the bargain bin. But we begin, as we always do, with some headlines of fantasy note. Beginning in New Orleans, the news just yesterday, Brian, that running back Mark Ingram has been placed on season-ending IR with a pretty major shoulder issue. Wasn't anything anybody was aware of until middle of the week, which is kind of awkward.
Yeah, that's actually pretty important because there's a lot of teams that were counting on Mark Ingram here in the next couple of weeks. Just looking at some matchup situations that they're running into, and some people are going to be in trouble.
Browns quarterback Johnny Manziel has been named the team starter going forward. Also in Cleveland, wide receiver Travis Benjamin considered day-to-day with a shoulder injury. He is questionable for this weekend. Titans wide receiver Kendall Wright injured his ribs last week. He's also questionable for Sunday. Darren McFadden left Monday's game, found that there was no concussion there, so he did return later, and he looks to be good to go for this weekend. DeMarco Murray, interesting situation in Philadelphia. He's expressed frustration over last week's usage, going so far as to reportedly meeting with team owner Jeff Lurie before going to his coach, Chip Kelly. What do you make of this situation?
Well, it kind of goes back to, Chip Kelly getting rid of those high-profile players. That's what DeMarco Murray is. Now, there's 2 sides to every story. Yes, we know play calling is not his strong suits. DeMarco Murray is an up and down, running downhill in between the tackles kind of guy. but he's also hasn't been the greatest thing since sliced bread this year either.
No, he's been downright awful. In fact, Eagles running back Ryan Matthews been out for a few weeks with a concussion. He expects to play Week 14 against the Bills, and I bet you he ends up with a lot more touches than DeMarco Murray does this week. Just a hunch. Broncos running back C.J. Anderson has a sore ankle. He's questionable for this weekend. He's missed some practice time, as has Ronnie Hillman, who's dealing with an injury of his own, but there is more positivity surrounding that injury, and it sounds like Hillman should be a go. Panthers head coach Ron Rivera says he will play his starters regardless of standings. Looks to me and sounds to me, Brian, like the Carolina Panthers want to try to go undefeated.
It's just their style. Did you really expect Cam Newton to settle for anything less? He would have loved to add that achievement to his life.
Onward to Miami. Dolphins wide receiver Rashard Matthews expected to miss another week with broken ribs. Jags wide receiver Allen Hurns has cleared concussion protocol. He could play this week. Chargers are down to basically nobody in their wide receiver core. Stevie Johnson is expected to miss this week with a groin injury. Dontrell Inman has his own injury and his neck, both looking pretty doubtful for Sunday. Not sure who he's going to have to throw to aside from Danny Woodhead out of the backfield and Antonio Gates. Darrelle Revis' status for Week 14 is up in the air, according to the coaching staff. He is in the league's concussion protocol. Bears tight end Martellus Bennett placed on IR, season-ending rib injury for him. Big upgrade to tight end Zach Miller. Giants have placed their tight end Larry Donnell on season-ending IR as well. Niners tight end Vance McDonald also questionable this week after a concussion he suffered on Sunday. Bengals tight end Tyler Eifert is practicing. He's on track to play this week. They're taking on the Steelers. Colts announced Matt Hasselbeck will start at quarterback in Week 14. The timeline for Andrew Luck keeps getting pushed back. Same with Peyton Manning. Broncos announced Brock Osweiler will start at quarterback in Week 14. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. Giants quarterback Eli Manning's ankle is fine, according to all reports. He'll play this weekend. Rob Gronkowski, probably not. He's less than a 50-50 chance to play. He did not practice on Wednesday. Brian, I have the honor of Thursday night football. Oh, goody.
Fire in the hole.
Minnesota, Arizona. We begin on the Vikings side. Teddy Bridgewater, I'm keeping on the bench. He's trending in the wrong direction, facing one of the league's best against the pass in their house. Forget it. Adrian Peterson is a B. The Cardinals only allow 4 yards per carry to opposing runners and have only allowed 7 touchdowns on the ground all season. Peterson is a volume play here, and you're hoping he's fed the ball exponentially more than he was last week. Huge disappointment in that loss against Seattle. The receiving core, not much to say here. Stephon Diggs, I'll give a C to. You're praying for some garbage time production from the rookie if you're planning to play him. Mike Wallace and everybody else I'm keeping on the bench. Kyle Rudolph, however, is a B-. Over the past 3 weeks, he's led the team in targets, and despite a relatively tough matchup, he may be the only Vikings pass catcher worth looking at, aside from maybe the home run swing in Stephon Diggs. On to the Cardinals. Carson Palmer, a B+. Fantasy's number 2 scoring quarterback in many formats. Palmer has been playing matchup-proof football all season long. This week gets a Vikings defense that was shell-shocked by the Seahawks in Week 13 and has several key players out with injury, so I love his chances. Also like David Johnson quite a bit this week. Give him a B+. Despite the perception that the Vikings are a solid run-stuffing unit, they've had major issues in recent weeks, giving up big games to the likes of Eddie Lacy, Tevin Coleman, and Thomas Rawls, all of which went over 100 yards in the past 3 weeks. Larry Fitzgerald, a B+, has a decided height advantage over Vikings corner Captain Munnerlyn, who's been good this season, but can be beaten by size and speed, which Fitzgerald possesses. He hasn't reached the end zone since Week 8, but has been a target monster regardless. John Brown, I'm giving a B- to. He's topped 70 yards and or scored a touchdown in 7 of his last 8 games. Likely sees a lot of aging veteran Terrence Newman in coverage, which is a really good matchup. Michael Floyd, a C+. He's flex-worthy despite likely coverage from Vikings cornerback Xavier Rhodes. Floyd's field time hasn't necessarily increased since his return to the field from a hamstring injury, but his targets and his production have. No tight end of fantasy note for Arizona, so we move on to Sunday, Brian.
All right, I'm going to lead off with the Bills-Eagles. This is a game, I hate to say it, but I'm actually really excited to watch this game. for one reason, revenge factor. Quarterback Tyrod Taylor, as you may have noticed, he's been pretty hot lately, so look for him to continue that streak here. He has a 65% completion rate. He has 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He didn't start every game this year, so take that into consideration. I'm giving Tyrod the B+ here this week against the Eagles defense. Running back LaShawn McCoy goes home. He's averaging 4.6 yards per carry. I'm going to give him a B here. But if you don't think Rex Ryan is just going to let him have his revenge, you need to reconsider your options. I think McCoy is going to have an average day, but look out for that angry factor to really knock it out of the park. Wide receiver Sammy Watkins, B+. His last 2 games, he has 267 yards and 3 touchdowns. I finally believe that Watkins is becoming his own, and the chemistry with Taylor is helping them out a ton. Wide receiver Robert Woods, C+. He has 1 touchdown in 4 games, and none of those 4 games he has over 50 yards, so he always just has that touchdown chance there. Not worth starting for me in your playoff run here. Tight end Charles Clay, C. He has 1 touchdown in 9 games. He had a big week last week, but don't be fooled. Look at the whole season in a factor. He started off hot, and he's just been kind of a second-hand act at this point. Quarterback Sam Bradford, B-. The defense saved him from another subpar game, and I expect the same this week. So don't get too excited on Bradford. Running back DeMarco Murray, you heard us talk about him, talking with the owner, going there. You can apply the squeaky wheel theory here and look at him being a B+. On the one side of the ball, maybe ownership is talking with Chip Kelly. Look, you're going to be fired here soon. Just give the guy the ball 25 times and let him have his wish. Or you can apply the Chip Kelly locking him away and get out of here, I don't want to see you. Then you would give Ryan Matthews that B+. So I'm a little torn myself in the grading system here. I'm going to go with the squeaky wheel theory, so I'll give DeMarco Murray the B, Ryan Matthews the B, or DeMarco Murray the B+, Ryan Matthews the B, just because of his pass catching ability. Wide receiver Jordan Matthews, he's going to get a B here as well. He has his second TD in 2 games, but you cannot count on him just yet. It always comes late in the game and always comes in garbage time, so just be careful. Cooper and Huff, you can't be trusted. Don't start them. Zach Ertz, C+. Just for me, no tight end of value here to start in that position on the Eagles.
Ryan Matthews is averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Give me one reason why DeMarco Murray, aside from the squeaky wheel theory you have, why he would get more carries with Ryan Matthews back in the lineup.
I'm a big believer in this play calling thing here on the Eagles. It's not his fault. It is not his fault. It's Chip Kelly. And I think if they're just going to be, fine, just let him have his wish and just let him run in between the tackles and just pound it. So that's my gut. I'm thinking DeMarco Murray is going to get the squeaky wheel. He's going to get it 25 times, and he's either going to have a great game or he's going to be injured, one of the two.
Yeah, you and I will agree to disagree on that. I think Ryan Matthews is the far productive back in that offense, and now that he's back in the lineup, I see them feeding him the ball, and DeMarco Murray, probably seeing the bench more often than not due to what he did going over Chip Kelly's head. How dare he? All right, on to Seattle and Baltimore. On the Seahawks side, Russell Wilson's an easy A. Incredible matchup here, and considering his recent body of work, you're not benching him. Thomas Rawls is a B. The Ravens have been very tough on opposing backs, but Rawls is a workhorse, kind of like Lynch, who can turn a bad matchup on paper into a nice fantasy day, and I think there will be a lot of work here. Doug Baldwin, I'm giving a B2 in this matchup. He absolutely has killed it since Jimmy Graham went down with an injury. This is, an outstanding matchup versus the league's 29th ranked defense against opposing wide receivers. But I think the Seahawks will get enough done on the ground and get up enough early to where they won't have to pass too much. Thus, Doug Baldwin has a good, not great, fantasy day. Tyler Lockett, I'm giving a C2. He's in the conversation as Seattle's second best pass catcher behind Baldwin in a plus matchup. Luke Wilson, however, I'm leaving on the bench. Until I see more from him, there have got to be better options available. On to Baltimore and the Ravens quarterback. Remember, Brian, back in the day on like Tecmo Bowl, when certain players probably just wouldn't give the rights up to their name for the video game?
Yes.
So this is a situation where we have no idea who's going to be under center for Baltimore, nor does it really matter. It could be Jimmy Clausen. It could be Matt Schaub. Doesn't matter who they trot out there. I'm not starting him. So Ravens quarterback, bench. Buck Allen gets a C. If the Seahawks can stifle Adrian Peterson, I'm willing to bet Buck Allen won't have much luck trying to move the sticks. Still, he's the only guy getting the touches out of the Ravens' backfield, so he may be worth a look at flex. The only wide receiver of note here is Kamar Aiken. He gets a C. Baltimore's best receiving option. Awful matchup, though, this week against Seattle. Crockett Gilmore, also a C. He's dealing with a back injury, which may sideline him this week anyway. Keep a close eye on him. Not a good matchup here regardless. I'm not sure I would start him.
All right. Well, we are going to make this one pretty quick here. The Niners-Browns. So strap in and buckle your safety belts. Quarterback Blaine Gabbert, he's going to get a B. Don't get excited. He did have a good game, but if you look at the last 4 games, he has 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Nothing to get excited about. He is playing the Browns, so we'll give him a B. Running back Sean Drawn, let's give him the B+. He does have 3.3 yards per carry. However, Cleveland is the 31st worst run defense. So I would expect this to be more on the lower side of the scoring. So that we're going to be running the ball a lot. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff like that. So look for Drawn here. He's going to have the highest grade B+ on the Niners. Wide receiver Anquan Bolden, B-. Torrey Smith, C+. Neither worth a start in your playoff roster. If you have to, go with Bolden, but definitely look elsewhere. No tight end of value on the Niners. Over to the Brown side of the ball, quarterback Johnny Manziel. I'm going to give him a B+. I believe in him. He didn't party this weekend. He may have learned his lesson, and he's going up against nearly bottom of the barrel on both run and pass defense. So Manziel can run the ball and he can pass the ball. He has some options here. Running back Duke Johnson, he's going to get a B. He has 10% of the targets in the passing game and is averaging 9 yards per catch. So watch out for that statistic, especially with Manziel having to check the ball down quite a bit. Wide receiver Travis Benjamin, you heard he's kind of gimped up a little bit. He should be good to go. B+ for him as well. He's number 1 facing a bad pass defense, and he's getting 17% of those targets, so watch for Travis Benjamin. The only other pass catcher here, tight end Gary Barnidge, A for Gary. He's got the potential for those checkdowns, but his receiving ability, easiest and the best on the Browns roster, and he gets an A grade. He is nearly the number 1 receiver on the Browns roster.
And I don't think anybody in the world called Gary Barnidge before this program did.
Yeah, no way. And that's the thing. We were talking about him early and often, and people are like, are you kidding me? That's so stupid. And now, look at him.
Who's laughing now, buddy?
That's right.
Detroit at St. Louis on the Lions side. Matthew Stafford is a B+. Typically, the Rams only give up about 1 passing touchdown per game, but since the Lions are really no threat to score on the ground unless they get near the goal line, I think Stafford's good for at least 2 in this matchup against the league's 11th ranked pass defense. Amir Abdullah, I am leaving him on the bench. He'll get he's getting more work as of late, but this isn't really a good matchup for him. Theo Riddick, however, I'll give a C to. He's a PPR helper if you need a flex. Calvin Johnson is an A. He's matchup proof. Don't overthink it. Just start him. Golden Tate, a C. He's worth a look if you need a flex with some upside. Eric Ebron, I'm giving a B- to. He could be a sneaky good play here against a Rams defense that ranks in the bottom half of the league against the tight end position. This is going to be very quick. On the Rams side, Nick Foles, I'm leaving on the bench. Todd Gurley, he's an A. Though the Lions defense has looked better in recent weeks, they're still ranked 18th against opposing runners and have given up the most rushing touchdowns in the league. Big workload ahead for the talented rookie. Tavon Austin, I'm giving a C to. Flex only if you're desperate. Truthfully, I don't like any part of the Rams passing game. That includes Mr. Jared Cook, who I am once again leaving on the bench.
Well, these are just kind of rolling through pretty quick here. The picture of fantasy value has become a lot more clear in recent weeks.
I would agree.
On to the Titans and the Jets here. Quarterback Marcus Mariota, he's going to get a B. I think he was asked to do a lot, and he's probably going to be so in another bad position if Kendall Wright can't go. Jets are a mid-pass defense, so look for Mariota to kind of struggle, and he's going to need some help in the running game. Running back Antonio Andrews, C+. He had a good week last week, but he is up against the number one run defense in the league in the Jets. So that help Mariota is going to need from Antonio Andrews is not going to be there. So Antonio Andrews, C+. Kendall Wright, if he goes, let's give him a B. 14% of the targets, but he's averaging 43 yards per game, which stinks. So that tells you Kendall Wright only has value if he's going to snag one of those touchdowns. Wide receiver Dorial Green-Beckham fooled me last week. He's probably going to have a good one this week here, B+, if Kendall Wright plays, because the Jets do tend to give up a little bit more points than they should to the wide receiver twos. So look for that to be a little bit of factor if Kendall Wright does go. And someone who is always going to catch the ball, tight end Delaney Walker. He's going to get the A grade here. 21% of the targets. He has 800 yards, and that 800 yards is more than double of the other wide receivers on the Titans roster. Pretty bad when your tight end is doubling everybody else up in yardage. Onto the Jets side of the ball, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. He gets the B+ here. Tennessee's pass defense has been falling down. They started off really hot, but if you look at the last 4 games, they just keep going down, 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 down. And that's good for Fitz because they need to keep it rolling, and he has the smarts to win. He understands defenses. He knows how to pick them apart, and he's got a great supporting crew. Running back Chris Ivory, give this guy an A. Look for him to be the big boy this week. He's averaging 4 yards per carry, and he's just going to keep it rolling. I expect the Jets to be up quick and then be able to control the clock on the Titans from there on out. Wide receiver Brandon Marshall, B+. He eclipsed 1,000 yards last week. In his last 2 games, he had 262 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's hot. Also, Decker, B+. Titans give up 25 touchdowns already this year, and Decker's going to get his. We still apply that rule of 3 theory to the Jets. If Ivory, Marshall, and Decker are all healthy and ready to go, start them at will. I think you can't miss here on the Jets roster unless you're going for a tight end. There are no tight ends of value.
What a great comeback by the Jets last week, and what a series of stupid coaching moves by the New York Giants. You know what, Brian, if we have enough time at the end of the show, let's talk about how stupid Tom Coughlin is and why he should have been fired yesterday.
Deal.
All right. One more matchup from each of us, and then we'll do the pop quiz. For me next will be Pittsburgh-Cincinnati. On the Steelers side, Ben Roethlisberger, I'm giving a B+2. This game has the makings of a shootout between the two quarterbacks. I think a lot of people thought the first matchup between these two teams would be a shootout. It wasn't. Though the Bengals have been largely very good against opposing passers on the season, including that team's first matchup back in Week 8, they'll be without stud corner Pac-Man Jones, who's out with an injury, so I do think that is something to take into consideration. D'Angelo Williams is a B. Only 9 carries for 71 yards rushing earlier this season against these Bengals. Williams should see more touches in this matchup, which should be higher scoring. At least I think so. Antonio Brown is an A, trending up big time in recent weeks. Brown is a commodity you do not want to bench no matter how tough the matchup looks on paper. If Ben is starting, and he is, you play Brown with confidence. Martavis Bryant, a B. The loss of Pac-Man Jones and the Bengals' defensive backfield will sting when it comes to trying to cover not only Brown, but Bryant as well, who has the speed and ability to beat nearly any corner put up against him. Marcus Wheaton, a C. His potential for success largely depends on Heath Miller's status for this game. If Miller plays, downgrade Wheaton to the bench. Speaking of Heath Miller, we're not quite sure yet, but if he plays, he's a middle-of-the-road option, a C+. Chances are you could find someone with more upside on your waiver wire. Andy Dalton, moving to the Bengals side. Give him a B+. He put up some extremely pedestrian numbers in the Week 8 game in Pittsburgh. I think the change of scenery will be a positive one for Dalton, who has averaged over 25 points per game in his last 3. Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard, I'm giving both C grades this week. Pittsburgh is one of the best in the league at stopping the run. Really bad matchup for Hill, who I wouldn't consider unless I had no one else. Bernard, he's been virtually invisible the past couple of weeks, but he does have a better skill set for a tough matchup like this. As far as the receivers go, A.J. Green is an A. Even with reports that Eifert might be back in action this week, Green has been nearly unstoppable the past few weeks. You plug him in, you don't look back. Marvin Jones, I'm giving a B-2. Would definitely consider him in a flex spot this week against a shaky Pittsburgh defense that ranks 26th against opposing wide receivers on the season. Tyler Eifert, If he plays, a B+. Expect he and Green to get the majority of the targets. Tough to bench despite being banged up with that neck injury. Tyler Eifert could be a really good play.
You know, I am really hoping they have a high-scoring game. I'm starting Dalton and Antonio Brown, so I need it to be huge.
There you go.
On to the Colts-Jags, quarterback Matt Hasselbeck. You heard earlier, he is getting the start, so Charlie Whitehurst fans, you're going to have to wait until later. I'm going to give Hasselbeck here an A. Jacksonville gives up the second most fantasy football points to opposing quarterbacks, and Hasselbeck has a 2-touchdown to 1 interception ratio right now, so not too shabby. He's been figuring out he's comfortable in the offense. Let's give him that A. Running back Frank Gore, he's going to get a B. Middle of the road run defense here. He's wearing the big boy pants now. It's all him. He has no other choice. I would expect him to get some extra points in the passing game. Just a little bit of added bonus there to Gore. But he is old. It's the end of the season. And that pitch count theory at the beginning of the season went away quickly. Wide receiver T.Y. Hilton, B+. Been 5 weeks since he had a 100-yard game. He's due. He's had his touchdowns, but look for a big yardage game here so he can get back to those extra points. Wide receiver Good Grief Moncrief, he's going to get a B. He has good yards after the catch and picks up targets to move those chains. He's getting 15% of the targets and averages 11 yards per catch. Tight end Colby Fleener, C-. He gets the targets, but it doesn't translate into much. He gets those small chunk yards, and nothing really ever transpires with it. There is the off chance he's going to get a touchdown this week, so if you have to, go for it. But, again, it's the playoffs, and I wouldn't take the swing for the fence on a tight end position. However, you can look at somebody like quarterback Blake Bortles. He's getting an A. He's looking really sharp. He has the wide receivers to help him out. Even though he doesn't have the overall stats, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Running back TJ Yeldon, B+, expecting a good role here. He's got 4 yards per carry. It's playing the Colts. If the Jaguars do bounce out to that big league, TJ Yeldon's going to get a lot of work. Wide receiver Allen Robinson, B+. He's been touchdown happy, hooking up, making your playoff dreams come true. How many people had Allen Robinson early on and are just paying huge dividends right now? It's impressive. He has 11 touchdowns and he has 24 catches for 20-plus yards, which is ridiculous. I think that might be league leading. Oh, by the way, he's number 5 on the receiver list. Wide receiver Allen Hurns, B. That concussion, he's going to be okay. He started doing some practice, so look for him to make an impact. He gets 15% of the targets and averages 15.8 yards per catch. Needless to say, the Jaguars need them both. Tight end, none. They can be trusted. Julius Thomas does have 4 touchdowns in 6 games, but isn't reliant. And with those 2 killer wide receivers, both healthy, I wouldn't expect much to go to him.
All right, Brian, it's time for the pop quiz. 3 of fantasy's toughest questions. Are you ready for number 1?
Smoke them if you got them.
Wise owners of Jamal Charles likely grabbed Charcandrick West, and some of them also grabbed Spencer Ware. Charles, of course, is out for the season, but both West and Ware are getting touches in the Chiefs' offense. So which is the one you should start now that the playoffs are upon us?
Well, I am a Charcandrick West owner. I am not a Spencer Ware owner, as he was stolen from me. If I had to choose, I would start Spencer Ware. Charcandrick West, it's like a 55-45 split on touches, but Ware gets it inside the 10, and them touchdowns are the points, bread and butter of your fantasy roster. So if I had to pick,
pretty much nailed it.
Yep, going with Ware.
Spencer Ware is the answer, despite seeing considerably less field time than West, 35-19 in number of snaps last week, by the way. Ware does tend to get pretty close to an equal amount of touches, plus red zone and goal line work, which is why he's the more likely candidate to produce bigger fantasy numbers week in and week out over West, who tends to do much of his damage in between the 20s. Nicely done, Brian. 1 out of 1. Question number 2. Are there any Eagles running backs you want on your fantasy roster in the playoffs?
I say no, just because that team, we just talked about it during my matchup. Those points are there for the taking, but that team is just so up and down, and quite often they play from behind, and they have to make those huge passes and just praying that Riley Cooper is their savior with a 60-yard touchdown grab. It's just too risky of a play for me. Even though I like to swing for the fences, I just don't trust that team.
I kind of knew you were going to go that direction anyway, so the answer as far as I'm concerned is yes, you want Ryan Matthews. He's been sidelined by the league's concussion protocol the past few weeks, but let's not forget, when he plays and is given ample opportunity, he has produced. He's averaging over 10 fantasy points in each of the games he's played this season, is averaging nearly 6 yards per carry, as I mentioned earlier, and is a receiving threat out of the backfield. DeMarco Murray has been dreadful much of the season. Darren Sproles is way too boomer bust. The easy answer here, if you can get him now, do it. Ryan Matthews. On to question number 3. This might be tough, Brian. Which NFL player will be on the most fantasy championship rosters this year?
Which fantasy football player is on the most championship rosters?
Right. Which NFL player will be on the most fantasy championship rosters?
You know what?
This year?
This one's actually pretty easy for me because I look at it in my own experience in leagues, and it is Allen Robinson. He is one of those late picks that was out there that is paying huge point totals right now. So while the answer might be something easy like some specific running back, as I look throughout my spread of leagues, who's in that top half of the playoff bracket, those 1, 2, 3 seeds, one common theme is Allen Robinson.
Not a bad answer. My answer, however, is Tom Brady.
Really?
At the price his owners were able to get him prior to the season, and more importantly, prior to the ruling in the Deflategate scandal, he's easily been the most bankable fantasy commodity this season, hasn't missed any time, is always good for a certain number of points, and I think in the end, you'll look at the majority of championship rosters in fantasy football circa 2015, Tom Brady will be one of the quarterbacks on that roster.
Well, I was keeping score, and I got all 3 right. I don't know what you were keeping score on, but in my scorebook, I got all 3 right.
You forget the alternate title for Pop Quiz was I Win.
Oh, okay. I see how this goes.
Back into the matchup, San Diego at Kansas City will begin on the Chargers side. Phillip Rivers is a C. Because I figure he'll be throwing a ton in this game, I'll say I'd like Rivers a lot more than I actually do because I'm not sure if he has anyone besides Danny Woodhead and Antonio Gates to throw to at this point. The Chiefs are also very good, generally speaking, against the pass, ranking 7th against opposing quarterbacks, and that ranking would be even higher if it weren't for the big game they gave up to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers early on this season. Danny Woodhead is a B-. The Chiefs have allowed the 8th fewest total yards to opposing runners, only 6 rushing touchdowns on the season. If it weren't for Woodhead's excellence in the passing game, I would be leaving him on the bench, and that's exactly where Melvin Gordon is this week, on the bench. No wide receivers of fantasy note for the Chargers. Antonio Gates, however, is a B+, one of Rivers' only solid targets remaining. I do think Ladarius Green will mix in some, but Antonio Gates is the guy to start. Alex Smith, moving over to the Chiefs, give him a B. Between he and Jets quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm not sure who has the easiest schedule going forward. Both are pretty awesome, though. And for Smith, it begins this week versus the Chargers, who give up the 12th most yards to opposing quarterbacks and have allowed 19 passing touchdowns on the year. As far as the runners go, Spencer Ware gets a B+. Ware is the Chiefs running back to own in a matchup like this, as we mentioned in the pop quiz. Against the league's 30th ranked run defense, he split carries with West in the first matchup with the Chargers and turned in nearly 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He figures to be the short yardage and goal line back with some change of pace duty mixed in. I like him a lot this week. Charkandrick West I give a C+ to. He may get his opportunities as well, especially if the Chiefs are blowing the Chargers out, but Ware tends to be the guy putting up bigger fantasy numbers. Jeremy Macklin gets a B this week, a good matchup even if he draws coverage from Jason Verrett. Expect plenty of looks in his direction. Travis Kelce, a B+. He has the potential to be a top 5 tight end this week, considering the matchup.
All right, Redskins, Bears, quarterback Kirk Cousins, B-. He's over 3,000 yards right now, something that surprised me. And the trouble is, he's going against the second best pass defense in the Bears, which surprised me. So give Kirk Cousins that B-. He's going to have to work for it pretty hard this week. Running back Alfred Morris gets a B. Matt Jones, B. I'm giving them both Bs. They're both going to have average numbers, but it's a toss-up who's going to get the touchdowns here. Chicago has a terrible run defense, so expect both of them to have a plethora of carries and yardage, but who knows what's going to happen on the touchdown aspect there, because you never know when someone's going to fumble. Someone to start on the Redskins roster, wide receiver Desean Jackson, B+ here. Newsflash, he has 3 touchdowns in 3 games since he came back, and he's progressively getting better. Definitely a start if I have him. He's shown what he can do with the Eagles. He's now showing what he can do with the Redskins and Kirk Cousins. Wide receiver Pierre Garçon, just because he is on the starting roster, we'll give him a C+. He's an afterthought on the offense, and I wouldn't put much stock in him anymore. Tight end Jordan Reed, D. He's up and down, and Chicago plays tight ends tough. On the Bears side of the ball, quarterback Jay Cutler, B. He had a poor showing against the Niners. He's playing through troubles here. People are hurt all around him. Good remedy for that is a team with average stats. So Cutler's going to get a B. Running back Matt Forte, B+. He had 21 touches last week, so he's back to a full load. That's always a good thing if you're Matt Forte. Running back Langford, he's going to get a C. He got 12 touches last week, and plus there's also a third running back in the mix now who's getting some of them little sneaky carries and them big chunks of yards. Wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey, probably the only pass catcher left on the Bears here. He's going to get an A. Washington gives up the 8th most fantasy football points, but Alshon Jeffrey does not have a touchdown in the last 5 weeks. He is going to shake that right now. Tight end Zach Miller, surprise, because everybody else is hurt. He's going to get a C. He's got to be able to figure in here somewhere, catch a couple of balls, but nothing's going to be great out of him.
Atlanta at Carolina. Begin on the Falcons side with Matt Ryan, who's a C+. The Panthers are a stifling defense against the run and especially against the pass, where they rank second against opposing quarterbacks, giving up only about 15.5 fantasy points per week to the position in standard scoring leagues. They actually have more INTs on the season than touchdowns allowed, and I believe they're the only team in the league that can say that. As far as Devontae Freeman goes, I give him a B this week. Carolina is 13th against opposing runners on the season, but in just the past 6 games, they've only given up an average of just over 11 fantasy points per game to the position in standard scoring leagues. Freeman will supplement his rushing yardage with plenty of receptions and receiving yards, which will help, but the Panthers have only allowed 8 rushing touchdowns on the year. You can't count on one from Freeman here, unfortunately. Julio Jones is a C+. There's no question in anyone's mind that stud cover corner Josh Norman will be shadowing Jones, and in the past, that has meant very little fantasy production from one of the league's best receivers. It sounds shocking, but I don't expect that to change in Week 14. Julio Jones, a C+. Roddy White, I give a C to. Just because he avoids Josh Norman doesn't mean White's a lock for a solid fantasy day. Peanut Tillman also has been very good against opposing receivers, so Roddy White's not a great matchup here either. Jacob Tamme, however, I give a B to. He should get an above-average amount of targets this week since the wide receivers figured to be slowed in coverage by and large. On the Carolina side, Cam Newton is an A-. The Falcons have been very good against opposing quarterbacks on the season, but there aren't many NFL quarterbacks hotter than Cam is right now. Despite being tied for 4th with St. Louis in touchdown passes allowed with only 14 on the year, Cam's a dual threat guy that can beat an opponent through the air and on the ground. Jonathan Stewart, also an A-. The Falcons give up just over 100 yards per game to opposing runners. They've yielded the second most rushing touchdowns in the league, 15. Jay Stu should get a lot of work in this game. Ted Ginn is a C+. Surprisingly, the Falcons' pass defense is every bit as good as Carolina's over the season. They give up around the same amount of yardage per game to opposing receivers and have actually allowed less touchdowns to the position than the Panthers have, which is sort of shocking. Devin Funchess, a C+. Both the Panthers' best receiving options should get equal amount of coverage from the Falcons' best, Desmond Trufant, who's been quietly one of the best in the league. Neither one are an excellent play this week, but either one could snag a touchdown pass from Newton. Greg Olsen is an A. The Falcons are a good matchup for opposing tight ends. Not that you'd consider benching him. Greg Olsen, always a great play.
Let's rewind 13 weeks here, and if I were to tell you the Saints are out of the playoff race and the Buccaneers are in the wild card race at week 14, would you believe that?
Crazy.
I know, it's ridiculous, right? Well, you can credit all that to quarterback Drew Brees. Let's give him a B-. He has been really bad on the road. Tampa Bay is fighting for those playoffs. They're going to play him good. Tampa Bay is an average defense, and Drew Brees is just not his old self. You have to bring that all into consideration. Sure, he has 2 great games, but other than that, he's probably cost you a couple of victories. Partner that with the loss of Mark Ingram, and now running back Tim Hightower is probably your starting running back. So good luck there, but don't. Stay tuned for the bargain bin because you're going to need it if you were an Ingram owner. Wide receiver Brandon Cooks, he's going to get a B+. He's the favorite target with 18% of those targets has 7 touchdowns, so he's really come on strong. If you look at those first 2 or 3 weeks, we were writing these guys off as dead. All of a sudden, they're doing this late resurgence here in the wide receiver category. If Snead is back, he has the injury concern there, B- if he's back. If he's not, give Coleman his B- because he's going to fill in well there and let him have a good day. Tight end Ben Watson, C+. I don't see many yards out of him like he has had in the past, but I do see a potential possibility of a touchdown here against Tampa Bay. Lots of people to cover. You never know who's going to catch that ball, so Ben Watson could have a touchdown on Sunday. Over to the Bucs side of the ball, quarterback Jameis Winston, he's playing great. He's going to have the support at home, and I expect him to do great things again. It's a great defense to really show some offensive prowess here against the Saints if the weather holds up. If it's pouring down rain, you have got to bail on Jameis Winston, so watch out for that because, hey, Tampa Bay, pouring rain, doesn't work well. Now, let's look at running back Doug Martin. Are you aware that Dougie Fresh is second highest in yardage among running backs and is only 50 yards behind Adrian Peterson? That is a crazy statistic that I was not aware of.
Wow.
Yeah, blow your mind, right? So guess what? Dougie Fresh gets an A. He's proven over and over and over under the radar that he is the number 2 running back in the NFL right now. Let's give Mike Evans a B and VJax a B+. While these two do play very well and complement each other very well, VJax has the way better hands, but Mike Evans does have 2 touchdowns in 3 games. So those kind of guys go back and forth on the touchdowns, but I'm going to go with consistency here. I'm going to give VJax that B+. Tight end Cameron Brate, someone Andy Hall has been calling, he is your tight end star of the week. New Orleans gives up the most fantasy football points to tight ends. And he had a low week last week, so here we go. Watch out for Brate. He's going to have a big, big day.
You really think so, even with Austin Seferian-Jenkins in there?
It's not 2027 yet, is it?
Well, ASJ got some field time last week. He didn't produce a whole heck of a lot, and he certainly wasn't on the field for more than about 20% of the snaps. But I think going forward, as he continues to get healthier, I think he's going to be the tight end option, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Even though if I were the coach of that team, I would tell Cameron Brate, you're the guy.
Yeah, wait till next year. Why are you going to mess with it? This is the one thing where Lovie Smith, he could get himself in trouble here. You start messing with chemistry and all that stuff, hey, things can go downhill really quick.
Real quick, if Drew Brees were to write a really sincere, from the heart apology to the Seattle Seahawks and send them like $10 in an envelope in the mail, do you think they'd send Jimmy Graham back to New Orleans?
That was a killer there, man.
Well, it was a disaster of a trade that should have never happened.
Yeah, just who knows, man? Who knows?
Yeah. Onward we go to Oakland at Denver. On the Raiders side, Derek Carr, a B-. The young gunslinger takes his shot against the league's #1 pass defense, the Broncos, who haven't been nearly as dominant in the past 6 weeks that they were in the first 6. Still, despite all the weapons Carr has at his disposal, proceed with caution. Latavius Murray is a C. Denver's not nearly as stout against the run as they are against the pass, but not many teams have been able to sustain a running game due to game flow. Murray is fine as a flex play this week, but don't expect anything more than maybe 10, 15 fantasy points total from him, and that's a ceiling. Amari Cooper is a C+. You can't rule him out completely, but certainly has his work cut out for him, whether he draws Chris Harris or Aqib Talib in coverage. Michael Crabtree, also a C+. Same story for him, who I look at as an equal in opportunity and ability to produce with Cooper. Seth Roberts, I give a C to. Sneaky decent play at flex. He's shown flashes of greatness when he gets open, and he may be that forgotten man in the Raiders' offense that could produce. Tight end Clive Walford is a B. Tight end is the one position the Broncos haven't been great at stopping this year, so I'd take a look at Walford. On the Broncos side, Brock Osweiler is a B. Good matchup for Denver, facing the league's 27th ranked defense against opposing quarterbacks. 271 passing yards per game and a total of 21 passing touchdowns allowed by the Raiders on the year. Ronnie Hillman is a B+. It's a great matchup regardless of whether C.J. Anderson plays or not, but an excellent play if Hillman only has Juwan Thompson to contend for touches. C.J. Anderson gets a B- if he plays. Monitor his status very closely. He may not. For the receivers, Demaryius Thomas is a B. I don't think Denver throws a ton in this game, but Thomas has easily been the main benefactor of the quarterback change for the Broncos, and unfortunately that's not great news for Emmanuel Sanders, who gets a C+. He's seeing a decent amount of targets, but hasn't really turned the corner and found pay dirt as of yet with Osweiler under center. Tight end Owen Daniels is a C. Oakland has been absolutely dreadful against opposing tight ends all season. Worth a look, especially since Vernon Davis is in the league's concussion protocol and doubtful for this Sunday.
On to the Cowboys-Packers, which is going to be a pretty good game, I think. Probably not. Quarterback Matt Castle, he's going to get a C. He has 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and is averaging a mere 178 yards per game. Good luck, no thank you, sir. So leave Castle with a C, and if you have to start him, good luck. Pay attention to the bargain bin. Running back Darren McFadden, B-. I expect him to not get a lot of work in the run game. I expect them to be behind very quickly and passing all day. If he does get the points, it's going to be in the passing game, but I don't expect that so much. And up in Green Bay, it's a little bit colder than that dome down in Texas. Wide receiver Des Bryant, he's going to get a B. He will be angry and often, so expect him to be fighting on the sidelines with coaches and players and all sorts of stuff, and the stat line is going to be the result of quarterback play. Don't be afraid to bench Des Bryant this week if you have to. You got to think about it, man. You got to risk it. Wide receiver Terrence Williams, B-. He's the leader in receiving yards last week, so that was a pretty big surprise, and it actually helped me knock someone out of the playoffs, so that was always fun. It's going to be a result of quarterback under duress, and whoever's open is going to get it. Wide receiver Cole Beasley, C+. Probably no time for even to get down to the third progression. Tight end Jason Witten, B. He's going to get them quick dumps to avoid Matt Castle's sack. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers, he's going to get an A here. Rodgers, A. Look for him to make a statement win at home to calm the fan base. 300 yards and 3 touchdowns for Rodgers. Now, how we were talking about the Eagles, which running back would you start in your playoffs? Which Packer running back are you going to start in the playoffs?
Easy. Lacy.
You think so?
Yep, I do.
He's just off and missing, and sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not.
I think he'll be there this week. I really do.
You think so? Well,
yep.
He might be, because every week I've been wrong, and I'm going to give him a B-. It's tough. It's tough to trust these guys. Every time I've called him for a big game, he's gotten benched. Every time I call him from a bench game, he's had a big game. So, B-. He's probably going to be snacking somewhere. Let's give Starks a B. To me, he is the only consistent running back here. He's someone who's just been there no matter how many times the Packers turn around. He's always right there getting their back. So, do you risk either? I'd pick Starks. Wide receiver Randall Cobb, B+. He's got 21% of the targets and is still the leading receiver. Even though he was frowned upon at the beginning of the season, look for him to start making his comeback. Wide receiver James Jones, B+. He has 14 catches for more than 20 yards, so that's not bad, especially considering everybody was proclaiming Davante Adams, myself included, to be the savior of that wide receiver core there. Tight end Richard Rodgers, C+. That Hail Mary saved his stat line last week. He went from 100 yards or 40 yards to 100 and a touchdown. So don't be fooled if you're just looking at the box score.
One more matchup from each of us, Brian, and then it's on to the bargain bin. Sunday night is New England-Houston. On the Patriots side, Tom Brady is an A. The Texans have been playing inspired football up until last week's stinker versus the Bills, in which Tyrod Taylor torched them for nearly 35 fantasy points in standard scoring leagues. I have faith Brady will do his usual amount of damage here. LeGarrette Blount, a C+. Despite their ranking of 21st in the league against opposing runners, the Texans have played remarkably better versus the run since Week 8. They've been averaging less than 12 points allowed to the position in their last 5 games. James White, a C+. I wouldn't go chasing last week's box score. Despite 10 grabs for 115 yards and a touchdown through the air, White's usage is very hit or miss. The Patriots still use Blount primarily on early downs and Bolden on passing downs. White's Week 13 was an outlier, in my opinion. Brandon Bolden is a C-, primarily the team's pass-catching specialist. As I mentioned, Bolden can't be counted on week to week, especially in the fantasy playoffs. Danny Amendola is a B. He figures to be heavily targeted again this week with the wide receiver core depleted by injury. Rob Gronkowski also likely to miss this week. Amendola saw 13 targets last week. He caught 7 of them for 62 yards and a touchdown. Much tougher matchup this week, though. Brandon LaFell gets a B-. Did very little with the 9 targets he saw last Sunday, and that's LaFell's game. You play him, he disappoints. You bench him, he goes off. Wouldn't count on a big game from him against a much-improved Texans defense this week, but stranger things have happened. The tight end is Scott Chandler. I give him a B+. A massive target that Brady trusts. Should be a good play again this week with Gronkowski likely to miss another game. On the Texans side, Brian Hoyer, a B. It's not a bad matchup, but worth noting that the Patriots have rendered opposing quarterbacks some very mediocre fantasy stats in recent weeks. Hoyer will likely need to throw quite a bit in order to keep pace with New England's high-powered offense this week. The running backs, Chris Polk gets the only starting grade for me. I give him a C. It's beginning to appear as if Polk is the new primary runner in Houston. Not that you're really considering him. You might, I guess, but it's kind of a dart throw because there's Jonathan Grimes to contend with and Alfred Blue as well. I'm leaving both of them on the bench this week, and Polk is my dart throw. DeAndre Hopkins, an A-. He's matchup proof. You start him, you don't think twice. Cecil Shorts, a B, seeing an enormous amount of targets week to week and getting the ball in a wide variety of creative ways. He's been very productive as the primary complement to Hopkins. Nate Washington, I give a B- to. He's being targeted nearly as much as Shorts in the passing game, but has yet to keep up in terms of production. With the Patriots likely to try and take Hopkins out of the game plan, look for Houston's secondary receivers, Washington included, to play a very big role. No tight end of fantasy note for the Texans.
All right, to a very exciting Monday night matchup, the Giants and the Dolphins. Quarterback Eli Manning, B+. 7th best passing offense and 24 touchdowns. Dolphins are some of the bottom feeders in the passing defense, so look for Eli to have a pretty decent game. Running back Rashad Jennings, he's a starter and out of touches, but it's just too deep a rotation. He is the leader, I guess, in the running back category there, but not worth a playoff start. Even any other running backs out there, if you have to go with somebody on the Giants, I'd go with Vereen just because he gets passes. Wide receiver Odell Beckham, give this guy an A. He is just matchup proof. It doesn't matter. He's always making those insane snags, and he will get you those nice extra bonus touchdowns there. He's probably going to light those Finn's corners up. He gets 24% of the targets. Wide receiver Ruben Randall here, worth a look here, worth a look. So let's give him a B. 13% of the targets. There's a steep drop-off in production beyond ODB, but I think Randall can play a good role here this Monday night. There is no tight end of fantasy value anymore here because he's on IR. So maybe that's where Randall makes up those extra shots. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill, C+. He had 86 yards last week and could not cut up the Ravens. Just absolutely terrible. Running back Lamar Miller, as we discussed last week, he got his due as predicted. 20 touches, 113 yards. Look for the same production again. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, B-. Quarterback play, big factor here, but obviously He's got to get something at some point. Other than that, who you got for wide receivers? Greg Jennings? I doubt it. Tight end Jordan Cameron? B. He's going to get his opportunities this week because there's nobody else left to catch the ball. So, if you are desperate and you need a tight end, put him in your tight end spot only, not a flex option, tight end.
You know what, Brian? A guy I like even better in that tight end slot than Cameron?
Who's that?
Will Tye, New York Giants.
Well, yeah, I guess, but
He's been producing. Have you not seen the numbers? I mean, he's actually getting a fair amount of targets, receptions, and yardage. The only thing missing from Ty's game thus far has been touchdowns. So, I don't know. If you're desperate at the position, I would actually give Will Tye a really good look.
Yeah, we'll just have to roll the dice on it and see what happens. But I don't know. I just think it's a ODB show here. And would you expect Coughlin to play smart?
We might have a 30 seconds to argue that out in a second. But first, the bargain bin for those of you that need a dart throw, a big dart throw this week. A lot of these guys that we pick week to week, one quarterback, one running back, one receiver, many of them happen to be right on your waiver wire, most likely. So we try to look at ownership percentages and pick guys that don't have very high percentages, less than 40% ownership typically. So in terms of quarterback, who you got this week, Brian?
Johnny Manziel. He is playing the Niners, and he has something to prove. I believe he is on audition for other teams over his last 4 games, as I believe he will not be in a Browns uniform at the end of the year. He played well his last start, had over 300 yards passing.
My quarterback's Tyrod Taylor of Buffalo. No team, not even the New Orleans Saints, have given up more fantasy production to the quarterback position than the Philadelphia Eagles, who have allowed 116.3 points in standard scoring leagues in their last 3 games. Eagles stock way down, Taylor's stock way up, having scored over 30 points in his past 2. I love Taylor this week. On to your running back.
I'm going with Spencer Ware. We talked about it earlier. A lot of people went for West. A lot of people didn't pick up Ware. So that split carries inside the 10, getting those chances at the touchdowns. Plus, they're playing the Chargers. Terrible run defense.
My running back this week is Duke Johnson of the Cleveland Browns. Faces the league's worst defense against opposing running backs. That's the 49ers, who have been killed all year by pass-catching backs like Johnson. On to the receiver. Who you got?
Marvin Jones. Look for him to sneak away from coverage against the Steelers, as they're going to be focusing on other individuals, especially if Eifert comes back. He's going to have a decent game and can help you get that win in the first round of the playoffs.
My receiver's Doug Baldwin of Seattle. I believe his last 2 games should be enough reason for him to be 100% owned. Somehow he's not. If you see him on your waiver wire, you may want to consider grabbing him before someone else does. He's got another incredibly juicy matchup this week against Baltimore's 29th ranked pass defense. I'm not sure Seattle's going to have to throw a lot in this game, but Doug Baldwin is a pretty good bet for a touchdown if the Seahawks do get one or more through the air this weekend. So how stupid is Tom Coughlin?
He's going to get fired, I'll tell you that much.
I mean, here's the scenario. So the Giants are up 2 possessions. Okay, they're in field goal range. They're way down there in the red zone. Josh Brown is about as money as it gets from, 40 and in. So all you have to do is kick the field goal. What does Tom Coughlin do? He goes for it on 4th down. Eli throws a pick. The Jets drive down the field, kick a field goal. They're within a touchdown at that point. Then they get the ball back. Go down and what do you know? Score a touchdown, tie the game. Then in overtime, the Jets win on a field goal. And then the Giants came down and missed a field goal. So the Jets win the game because of Tom Coughlin's stupidity.
Well, that's not the only time. Look all the way back to like week 2 or 3.
Yes, all season long. It's just been a mess.
When Jennings, it's like 1st and goal from the 4, and Jennings is told not to score. So he just keeps finding a soft place to land. They kick a field goal, and then they get screwed over and lose again.
In case you missed any part of the show, feel free to listen on demand anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, and the Libsyn website. 515 Fantasy Football is on Facebook. We're also on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. We love answering your questions. We love the fact that you're listening. Best of luck in Week 14. For Brian Eikenberry, I'm Andy Hall, and this is the 515 Fantasy Football Show.